Want to know what the movers and shakers of New Hampshire's performing arts are thinking? Welcome to New Hampshire Unscripted with your host, Ray Dudley.
This is Ray Dudley, Artistic Director for Square Peg Productions. My guest for this episode is Bryan Halperin. Bryan is a good friend of mine, and I gotta tell you, at times in this interview, he had me in stitches. Just thinking about it makes me start laughing. Anyway, in this episode, we talk to Bryan about his beginnings as an actor and a director, and then we talk about his role in the first version of the Winnipesaukee Playhouse, and then we get around to his bucket list and which plays he would still like to direct, and then we talk about a play which has giant lizards in it. That alone is worth listening to. Then I talked to him about his time at the New Hampshire Theater Alliance as a director. I got him to talk a bit about what style of a stage director he feels he is. Some are micromanagers and some are just kind of freewheelers. Interesting what his take is on that. We get into an update and some insight about what's going on with the theater in downtown Laconia. And then he opens up about his future projects and what's going on and what's coming up. And finally, he just cracked me up when he made a reference about me being some kind of a Bugs Bunny cartoon character. I'm telling you, you gotta hear that part. Stay tuned. In studio with Bryan Halperin, my day is made. How are you?
You know how to flatter a guy. Eh?
How's things?
Things are good. Busy. Good big day of things to do in Concord.
Like what?
Going over to Hatbox for the rest of the day after this to do some stuff over there. And then I have rehearsal tonight for Amelia, which opens at the Hatbox in April.
Got it on the schedule.
So yeah, keeping busy and happy to come spend some time with you.
Thanks. I'm really looking forward to it. One of the things I wanted to talk to you, there was a couple of things I really wanted to get into. One was your connection to the Laconia Theater and get some background information on that and get an update. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about was your previous stint with the NHTA, and then I wanted to see what upcoming things you've got going, what you've got in the pipeline,
Sure.
And then anything else you might want to talk about that's relevant to your life.
Okay.
And before I get into all that, how about some background? Where are you from? Most people don't know you have an operatic voice. And that you,
Yes. I save that for very special occasions.
Where do you guys come from? What's your whole background here? And then if you want, you can kind of tie it into the Winnie, or if you feel comfortable. If not, we'll just clip that out. So give me some who is Bryan Halperin?
Bryan Halperin is a little suburbanite from Westchester County, New York, who was very into sports growing up, but also had a family that was very interested in theater and being so close to New York City. My parents took us to see a lot of Broadway shows, mostly musicals, but occasional play as well. So if you name a show from the 1980s that was kid appropriate, I probably saw the original cast on Broadway. So always had a love of musical theater. Did some theater growing up, but where I was from, there wasn't a lot of outside of school theater opportunities. I think there's more in that area now, but back then it was either sort of school theater or school sports, and I was really into sports, so theater was sort of something I did for fun outside of sports and at summer camp and things like that. Never had really any expectation of going into theater for full time or anything like that. Went to a liberal arts college outside of Philadelphia. Met Johanna doing Fiddler on the Roof my junior year, her senior year. Johanna's my wife, for those of you who are listening to this but have no idea who I am. I'm guessing there's very few people who are listening to this who don't know who I am, not because I'm famous, but because I imagine most people clicking on this podcast to listen.
Very small circle.
Right, to listen for a while probably have at least some idea who I am. But Johanna's my wife. We met doing college theater. And then I did an internship. So I did a lot of theater in college, and then after college just expected it would be a hobby for the rest of my life. Johanna and I, after school, ended up in the Boston area and got involved in a bunch of community theaters there. And we moved to Natick, Massachusetts, and they were opening a new performing arts space in town, and it started in a little storefront theater. This may start sounding familiar, but a guy had been given the old firehouse in town for $1. Natick had built a new firehouse, and he was able to purchase it for $1 and started not-for-profit to raise money to renovate it. And in the meantime, he rented a storefront, literally a storefront in downtown Natick. And he'd have bands, he'd have little things that fit in the storefront, mostly music. That was his thing. But he wanted to start theater there. And Johanna and I got involved there and did some little shows. We did 12 Angry Men, where pretty much the 12 of us were about equal and took up about as much space in the theater as what was left for audience, and sort of watched how this man was creating a art space out of nothing. And I ended up directing the musical Baby as the first theater production in the new Firehouse when it finally opened. But we weren't involved in the creation of the space other than helping them with the theater side of it and starting a little community theater group there. But watching it, we sort of realized, oh, this is something we would like to do, we think. We saw how it didn't take much to begin it. It just took one person, in this case, with a passion and a desire to see this thing happen and take the leadership of it. And it was around that time that my sister and brother-in-law were thinking of moving to the States from England. And we all started talking about starting a theater together. And my father's family, extended family, ran a sleepaway camp for many years, from like the 1920s to the 1960s. So his whole childhood was spent with all his cousins and aunts and uncles at this summer camp. And he had sort of always hoped that we might have some kind of family business that we could do as an extended family at some point. So with my parents' encouragement, left my job in Massachusetts. So we had a toddler and a newborn and a baby niece as well. And we all moved to central New Hampshire and started a theater in a storefront, basically, and sort of followed that model that we had seen have success in Natick. And the place in Natick I'm talking about is called the Center for the Arts in Natick, and it still exists. And I think they're doing well, and they still have theater there and a lot of music acts. So that's how we sort of got to New Hampshire.
So you created the one that was in the little mall there up in the Wares?
Yep. So we started in 3 storefronts instead of 1, but 3 storefront units that were put together, 1 being the backstage office support space and 2 being the theater itself. And you performed there, I think, only once, right?
I did, The Odd Couple, yeah.
Yeah. And so we started small and worked our way up.
You look back on that, would you do that again? Or is that like flushed out of your system?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of great things that came about.
I hear great stories. That's why I hear great stories about what happened in the
old days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was a space that was so limiting that it really forced a lot of creativity, and there was a spirit in there that I do sort of miss. The closest thing to it is sort of what's happening at the Hatbox now, except the Hatbox being a bunch of different people coming in and using the space versus, one core group of people learning the intricacies of how to use every corner of the available space. I mean, we were literally building to the windows and the corners and the doors, and it was a really excellent learning experience for how to do theater pretty much anywhere.
And now, unfortunately, you have to be nomadic, right? You don't have a home. That was a home for you, right,
yes,
as your group. And now you have to go to the Hatbox, the Audi. I don't know where else you're performing.
I did some stuff at Little Church the last couple of years.
That's right.
Yeah. I've taken those skills to be adaptable to different spaces. I also, run the middle high school program at Interlakes, so I'm working with kids. And, I've been doing that for 4 years now.
How do you like that?
It's very different. I mean, I do it because my kids are involved and they needed somebody to do it, and I had the time. I don't love working with kids and doing theater.
I'll cut that out later.
No, I mean, it's honest. I enjoy working with them and getting them to do something well, and I enjoy being able to do theater with my kids. If my kids weren't involved, I don't know that I would do it.
Mm-hmm. You're one of the busiest people I know. You are.
Well,
I mean, you have back to back projects. You never stop.
Yeah, but I mean, this is between that and the school project. That's what I do, so I have to keep busy. But it's not always that busy. I've been on a good run this year. I don't have anything planned after this summer, so it slows down.
Yeah, I don't know.
It comes in waves.
Yeah,
something will come up probably. But
so at this point, I'm thinking most people know you as a director, and probably not many know you as an actor. You said the acting came way before directing. Did you always want to direct? Because you seem to have a great affinity for it.
No, I never directed until Well, I co-directed something in college, but that was just because I was, a senior and somebody needed to direct. Everybody wanted to act. But basically, by the way, I was in it too, so I still acted, but I wasn't looking at it as I wanted to be a director. I was looking at it as I want to act, and somebody needs to helm this project, or it's not going to happen. Gotcha. So I can do both. But growing up, like every kid does, kids don't dream about being directors. Kids dream about being actors.
I know, but there's a fear for some folks. There's a fear for somebody getting on stage and performing. So I didn't know if perhaps the behind-the-scenes thing was a stronger desire for you than being out front.
No, growing up, I definitely would have wanted to be an actor for sure. I just didn't really have the talent or the drive to be serious about it. But in community theaters where I started getting into directing, and this was in Massachusetts after college, and I was doing a production of The Nerd. I saw the original Broadway cast with Mark Hamill in the 1980s, and it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. So I was excited to be in this play. And the guy had this resume. I don't remember the guy's name, so I can't out him anyway, but, had a resume of all sorts of professional and community productions, and he didn't do anything. And we moved ourselves around. His stage pictures were awful. Nothing made sense. We kind of just directed ourselves, and that just got me thinking that I can see what looks good and where people should go. And I think when people start directing, they think a lot of it is blocking. Directing is blocking, moving people. And over time, you learn that that's just one tiny aspect of it. Probably the least important. If you have good actors, they can most of the time even move themselves. But I got into it for thinking, well, if this guy has this long resume with all these projects, and he's, as far as I could tell, didn't do anything of interest or anything good, and I'm basically, as an actor on stage, moving other people around because everyone's just standing there not doing anything, and I'm making suggestions. It's like, maybe I should give it a try. And, like anything, you try it the first time, and there are things you're good at and there are things you need to learn. And when we started the Playhouse was really an opportunity to learn how to direct, and not through classes or anything. I mean, I'm not a trained director, though I've had a lot of success directing. And it's, just something I felt my way through and got better and better at. And the more shows you see, the more you pick things up from, and the more shows you do, the more tricks you get in your bag, whether it's, the psychological aspect of dealing with people or the storytelling theater, which I love. Is everyone teases me that everything I do is storytelling theater, which is not true, but a lot of it is, yeah. But, where you get to create out of nothing and use your imagination and the skills of your actors to, figure out something that is blank on the page other than the words. So I just sort of fell into it and got a lot of practice. And at the Playhouse, I was doing youth theater, community theater, and professional theater. So I was working with actors at all different stages of advancement and kind of learning that my directing style was going to end up being the same for all three groups. It didn't really matter. It was how you deal with people and how you create a vision for the show and get people to buy into your vision, no matter what age or experience level the actors have. I like to do things that I'm not a copier. I don't tend to pick plays or musicals where the audience will just expect you copy the Broadway version. Mm-hmm. Now, that's certainly a skill set of directors to take amateurs and make it feel like you're doing the Broadway version, but that doesn't excite me as a director. I want to bring something to it, fresh and new, of my own. So I tend to pick material that doesn't have that Broadway stamp of approval, like you have to do it like this because this is what everyone will expect to see.
You're working your way then, I'm guessing, through a kind of bucket list.
Yes. This year I've been clicking a lot of things off my bucket list, which is actually scary because I've had these things on the list for a long time, and it's like, what am I going to be excited about next? Because I'm running out of them. So Farnsworth Invention was on my list. Peter and the Starcatcher I did at school with the middle and high school kids, and that's a terrifying experience to try and do Peter and the Starcatcher. I mean, I had fifth graders who'd never been on stage before, and it actually came out pretty good. We were all happy about it. I think the kids rose to the challenge, but that was on my list. Amelia's been on my list since 2011. So yes, I've been...
Was Barnum on your list?
Barnum was probably top of my list since I was a 10-year-old boy in 1983 and saw the Broadway production. I'd been fascinated by Barnum ever since. And so, yes, Barnum was a long time coming, but then something like Hunchback, which a year before I did it, I had never even seen it. I mean, it was so new, and I happened to see the Ogunquit production, and then somebody suggested, why don't we try and do it at Concord? And I was like, yeah, it was great at Ogunquit. And again, Hunchback is essentially storytelling. For a big, spectacular musical, it's essentially storytelling theater at its core, where you have to use your imagination to figure out how all these things are going to happen, how he's going to pull on the ropes and how he's going to fly through the air and scale the buildings. And, so Hunchback was like a perfect example of what I like to do, take a mainstream thing, but have a chance to make it your own. I mean, I don't think there's ever going to be two productions of Hunchback that are the same. There's no formula for doing it.
So your bucket list, are there many things? What's on it left? What's left that really you're like, man, I have got to get this one done before time runs out?
Do you know something I don't know?
I don't, but every day
time is running out. I'm only 45, right?
I know, every day. Well, maybe it's because I'm so old now that I keep thinking that stuff.
Johanna and I have wanted to do Seascape for a long time, which we've mentioned possibly doing it with you at some point.
I've heard about that.
But Seascape is a tricky one. We tried twice to put it in a summer stock season, but Albee has all sorts of approvals he needs to make for professional productions, and we never were able to get the approvals in time to plan our season. So it will probably have to be a community theater thing at some point, but I think that's one.
Why that one? What's intriguing about Seascape?
Honestly, Seascape is more for Johanna. I mean, I really like it. It's a neat play, but I get to pick things all the time that excite me, and Johanna thinks it's one of the funniest plays she's ever seen or read. So mostly I want to do it for Johanna. That's kind of why I made my list.
That's true love right there.
That's right. I want to direct something to impress my wife and make her happy.
My woman.
She goes on all these journeys with me, whether it's helping me produce or do props or something. She's always involved in somehow, but I'm usually the one who picks them, and they're the things that excite me. For once, I would like to do something that excites her, but that's not an easy one to do. You need a lot of sand, and you need giant lizards, so... For the record, we haven't talked to Ray about playing a giant lizard. I think we'd spare everybody that. He'd play the human male, not the lizard male. Nobody wants to see Ray in a lizard suit.
That cracks me up.
So I was thinking about our relationship, Ray, because we've known each other a while now. We've only actually worked together once.
That's right. That was by mistake.
And that was on stage.
Yeah, that was because someone got sick.
Well, I was in it. I was just a different role.
Right.
Yeah. But so you've never actually auditioned for me, after all these years.
Correct.
And all these nice things you say about me in my directing, you still haven't auditioned for anything I've done.
I don't want to be a lizard.
No, I wouldn't even consider you as a lizard. You wouldn't make the cut.
You're killing me.
We wouldn't get you up off the ground if you were. You need like a hoist or something.
Oh, I love you. Oh man.
And I won't even pretend to be hurt that you had a chance to perform under me this summer, but we won't talk about that.
Oh, I was talking to Joel the other day too. I really felt bad for about a minute. Yeah, he thought that might come up someday. I tried to work it out, but your competition kind of grabbed me early. Anyway.
Well, we'll do better than you. You're not that good at musicals. For the record, I'm working with Joel Mercier up at Gene's Playhouse this summer doing the Fantastics. I'm not involved in the casting because it's summer stock season that Joel's casting, in tracks. But he offered Ray a role. But
I was busy.
Ray's busy.
I'm busy.
He's in demand. An old guy who can still memorize lines. You are.
I'm unique.
You are unique. You are like the prize.
I'm the MacGuffin.
You're what every director aspires, a white-haired guy who can memorize lines.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, I needed that.
Ray's so in demand that those of us who know him well have to put him down to keep his ego in check. Otherwise, he'd be insufferable.
Yeah, that's my problem. Big ego. How did you like being director of the NHTAs? Was it director? What was the title?
I was executive director for 3 years. And, the NHTAs is an interesting thing. On one level, it's silly, right? Theater's not supposed to be about awards and competition. It's supposed to be about getting a group of people together and collaborating and doing the best thing you can do at whatever your resources and abilities allow. So on one level, the competition part is what it is, because at this point, that's still what the New Hampshire Theater Awards or Theater Alliance is. On the other hand, I think it's done a really valuable thing for New Hampshire in bringing people together to meet and see each other's work, support each other's work, get to know new people, take chances. So I think it's had a lot of value. I know from the Playhouse, we had a lot of good fortune early on in our first couple of years getting some awards. And that basically put us on the map with the New Hampshire theater community. Now, that doesn't necessarily help us sell tickets or anything to our local populace, but it's a nice thing to be able to put on your website and your marketing materials, and it got theater people aware of us, at least, who wouldn't have otherwise. So I always saw a lot of value in the Theater Awards, and when I had some time in my schedule and they were looking for somebody to sort of lead it into its next phase, I decided I had the time to give it a shot. But it was an awful lot of work for basically a volunteer position, and a lot of that is because the reality is a lot of the groups who participate don't fully participate in the way they should, Well, like constantly chasing down adjudicators to get their ballots in, or just to alert the theater that they were coming, or get the theater groups to post their nominations on time so we could get them out to the adjudicators. I felt like I was becoming like the NHTA nag, constantly just nagging people to do what they signed up to do. And that was a large part of sort of the burnout after a few years of, why am I working so hard on this, putting in so many hours, making these assignments and doing this, and then I just have to chase people down constantly. So there's good and there's bad to my time at the NHTAs. I think some of the good is I think I made the adjudication training system better, and people have said that, it started to make more sense to go more into the depths of how you adjudicate rather than the rules of adjudicating. I think I was more efficient at getting out sort of the assignments and making that part of the management stuff better. And I think the thing I'm most proud of, and I'm still doing, or at least I was through this year, was the show, which we sort of finally figured out how to keep it to 3 hours or less, or close to 3 hours. And the best part to me is the performance ensemble, which is something we thought of as sort of the ultimate way to get different people from New Hampshire theater groups collaborating on something, not just sitting in an audience together once a year, but actually pulling people who haven't worked together before to do some of these parody numbers and the memoriams and stuff. And I've met a whole bunch of people through that have ended up then auditioning for shows for me and stuff, and that I've become friends with. So that really, I think, served the ultimate purpose of the Theater NHTA's mission, which is to bring people who love theater together to collaborate on something.
Yeah. My wife and I, the entertainment portion is really the driving reason we like to go. And I haven't been able to go the past couple of years. But it's such an entertaining show. You could take the awards out as far as I'm concerned. And it's just wonderful to pay some money. And you see all these musical numbers. You see some comedy pieces. You see some clips and cuts. As an entertaining night, I think it's got it all. I think it's come a long way from what it was.
Well, that's where, when Gina Carballo, who is president, and I were working together on this as producers for the last 4 years now. I mean, that was our top goal, which was no inside jokes. This isn't about celebrating, Southern New Hampshire community theater. It was about inclusiveness. It was about reminding people what we all like about theater collectively, and trying to put together a show that everyone would enjoy, regardless of whether their group was winning lots of trophies, or that there were hopefully someone on stage from their group performing, whether either in a number from their show or in the performance ensemble, somebody hosting, that everybody in the audience could have somebody they were rooting for or happy to see on stage, and make it an inclusive thing. Because what's the point otherwise? I mean, a competition is ultimately divisive, but that's not really the goal of the Theater Awards. It's inclusiveness.
Right. And I would hope that on one level, people aren't attempting to perform during the year based on the awards. It shouldn't be a driving factor in your performance. I'm hoping, again, to get adjudicated and possibly win something. I mean, you're either good or you're not. You're either going to give a good show or you're not.
There's also, an inherent randomness to the luck of the draw of what adjudicators you get.
Very subjective, right?
Yeah. As much as we try to normalize the scoring scale at the trainings and stuff, as the person who was in charge of vetting all the ballots and, proctoring them for adjudicators, there's just a wide range of adjudicator ability of the people who are doing it. Some seem to know very little about theater. or at least can't write eloquently about it. And others are so critical that you think, what scale are they looking at? I used to tell people at training, like, the majority of stuff you will see is going to be in like the 50 to 60 range.
Right.
That means, average to good. The real special productions are going to be above that, and the occasional complete misfire where miscast, misdirected, none of the technical stuff's good will be below average or poor. Yet, some people feel like they have to sort of knock down everything, and others feel they have to praise everything. And that's why you hope with the randomness of 6 adjudicators, you get some balance between that in the pool of 6 you get. But ultimately, everyone should take the awards with a grain of salt. It's about participating. It's about sharing your work with others in the theater community. And it's about celebrating the year in theater at the end of the year. That's how I always viewed it.
Did the move to the Capitol Center, would that come under your purview?
Yeah, so it was really Gina's idea to do that.
Was that a big thing?
Yeah, because, it had been at the Palace for a long time and then 3 years at the Stockbridge. But, for the people like Mia and you up north, Stockbridge is a hike to get to for a one-night event on a weekend night.
In the middle of January.
Yeah, and Concord was just so much more central and so many more restaurants around for people to go to before the show, or hotels to stay at that are a walking distance after. And I think it feels like more of a spectacle, at the Capitol Center, because most people who go to the Capitol Center are going there watching professional tours or professional music acts that come through there. Mm-hmm. Derry's a beautiful space, but it's at a school. There's certainly a different feeling to going to Capitol Center for the arts.
Yeah, well, the ambiance, right? You're walking in, there's the big marquee that's lit up.
Yeah,
you get the walkway. And
I think it makes it feel like a little bigger event, but mostly it's the central location.
I can't imagine the logistics of putting that show together.
Clint has handled the sound the last 3 years. Tyler Susi, last 2 years, has done set and lights and overall sort of technical management. Yeah, it's a lot of work, but we essentially got it down to a formula.
How is it funded?
Through ticket sales.
All the awards and everything are all covered through ticket sales?
And some sponsorships. That has been the biggest limitation to the New Hampshire Theatre Awards doing sort of anything but the award show. There's no revenue stream other than the night of the show. We don't charge for participation from the theater groups. Your payment is essentially your adjudicator that you're putting into the system. So there's, limitations to what the group's able to do based on the fact that all its revenue comes from and goes into the production of the show.
Getting back to your directorial career, when you look back at things you've done, is there anything that stands out that you're either like, I wish I had another shot at that. I would have changed things up a little bit. I would have done it differently. Maybe I would have cast it differently. Is there a show that you not have regrets over, but just would like another shot at, stab at?
Oh, that's a good question. There are certainly shows that I've done that I'm more proud of than others, and just I know that I hit that one out of the park. I don't think I would have done anything better. I can't think of any show I've done that I think was so bad that they need a redo.
Yeah, no, I guess I didn't mean it that way, but I often speak with my wife about how difficult it is to put on a great show. Because the variables, you don't know who's going to show up for auditions. You don't know how the technical aspects that you hope that they're all going to work out right. But to get the right cast at the right time in the right show with the right director, the best set designer, the best lighting, the best sound, is pretty rare. And that's why we have a lot of shows that fall within the 50 to 60 range on the scale, because they're average. When you come across one that is extraordinary, you know how rare that is. And I was just curious if there was something like, I really love that show. We came close. I just might have done something a little bit differently to put that over the top.
You know what? I just forgot I did direct you in something. We did Sylvia 2 years ago.
Oh, yeah, at the little church there. Yeah. We are getting old.
Yeah, we're getting old.
You say you're 45.
Well, the only reason I just think of that is because I did Sylvia in the summer stock in like 2005 or 6, and I was still pretty much newer as a director. And there was one scene in that, the Leslie scene, the psychoanalysis scene, that I just didn't think I got right. And there was another scene in there where sort of the actor went to anger, and anger was a legitimate choice, though I didn't think it was. I thought hurt would have been a better choice, but I didn't push him on it. He was a professional actor, and I'm just some young guy, and there was nothing. I couldn't vocalize why anger was the wrong choice, because it was a completely legitimate choice. But I should have pushed him to just try it as hurt instead of as anger. And so when we redid Sylvia, I was emphatic that I was going to try hurt in that scene this time.
Excellent.
And then the psychoanalysis scene was it's just such a weird scene that just still needed more figuring it out. And I think I got more out of it this time than I did the first time. But I don't tend to think about that stuff. I mostly look back and think about, the ones that were just awesome experiences.
Mm-hmm. But they're rare. Are they not rare?
I usually find something pretty positive to take out of everything. The ones that stand out are the ones that I just think, as a director, I'm most proud of because I feel like we nailed it. And that's a we thing, of course, because you can have the greatest ideas in the world, but without the production team and the cast buying into what you're selling and helping tell that story, it doesn't work. But Hunchback's a perfect example. A community theater production with 50 people in it on what's actually a pretty small stage at the Audi for a big theater. It's not a big stage. And I just think every element of that we just did really well. And the actors were so committed to telling that story in the way that I wanted it told. And then another one I look back to, and it's fresh in my head because I just saw Theater Kapow do it recently, but Shipwrecked, I did, I think the New Hampshire premiere of it in 2010 or 11.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, in the summer season with Richard Brundage as Louis de Rougemont. And that was one of my favorite directing experiences. We got a double standing ovation at the end of that show because we sort of had the surprise at the end where they thought the show was over and we had this sort of magic bit, and then it was really over, and so the audience sort of erupted twice, and I never had that experience before. So there are things like that stick out in my head of shows where everything just came together exactly how I envisioned it at the beginning. And so those are the kinds of things that stand out. I don't really dwell on the things that
weren't
amazing.
Pin you down.
That's okay. If I could think of something, I'd tell you.
That's all right. Well, how would you describe your directorial style? Are you a micromanager, or are you on the other end where you just say, well, put something on its feet, let me see what's going on? Let the actors wing it.
It's a little of both. I like to discuss. I'm not a big game player or improv or exercise guy. I come across things through discussion, usually, and for thinking out loud. So I like to talk about stuff with actors, and then I like to see what they do because I get ideas off of what they do. So it's a little of both. I think actors will tell you, who've worked with me will tell you I'm very detail-oriented.
But that doesn't mean I want you to walk 10 steps, and on this word, you turn around, you're going to blink twice, and then pick up the pencil.
No, that's programming. That's not directing.
Yeah,
I think a good director gets that without telling you that. That's what I see it. If I need a choice to be that specific, I want to find a way to get the actor to get there without me just saying,
it's agonizing to work the other way. I hate it. It's so constraining, I can't take it.
But I think that seems to be what new directors think that's how you direct. And I think I was certainly more like that when I was first starting, that I thought it was my job to block everything versus to create an environment for the actors to explore and be on the same page with you. I talked about vision. I think, again, actors who have worked with me will tell you that I have usually a very clear idea of what I want this production to feel like. So it's up to me to be able to vocalize that in a way that they understand it and get on board and ideally be excited about it as well. Particularly going back to, we've talked about, a lot of the shows that appeal to me are not shows where you can just go watch the bootleg YouTube video from the Broadway cast and we're going to copy that. So the only way they can get to where it's in my head is if I'm able to enunciate that to them and make them have an understanding of why we're doing it in this style or what we're going for. So micromanager in the sense that I really do pay attention to every detail, but not micromanager in that I'm directing every detail, if that makes sense.
Did you have any particular difficulties putting Barnum up at the Hatbox?
No, not really. The biggest limitation was that we didn't really have any circus skills in the cast. To me, that show was about a man reliving his life on his deathbed, not about the circus. It's sold as a circus show because that's what people know Barnum as. But the circus was a really small part of Barnum's life, really just the last, sort of quarter of it. He did a lot of things completely unrelated to the circus prior to him becoming what we know. So that was a case of understanding what space I had to work with. This was not going to be a spectacle. We weren't going to be pulling trapezes down from the ceiling or rigging tightrope wires across. There's just no way to do that. My concept for Barnum was that Barnum is on his deathbed bed, essentially looking at heaven's light to go toward the pearly gates and reliving whether he deserves it or not. Was he the manipulator and the fraud and the person that his critics say he was? Or was he the dreamer and the idealist who wanted to bring joy and colors to people's life and for a few hours take them out of their daily drudgery and bring, a spark to their life? So the reminiscing of the play was about him reliving that. So it took a very big circus musical and made it a story about basically a man and his love for his wife, which, those of you who know me, is a thread throughout my work. I often have shows that are sort of about, when I write plays about precocious female children, because I know precocious female children well. And when I direct, I'm often directed to sort of love stories that are about couples where the guy is maybe a dreamer or a bit out there and the woman is sort of his grounding point and biggest support. That's to me what Barnum was about. So I think that's why it did so well. That was one of those things where Barnum and Hunchback finishing neck and neck, for the theater awards that year. To me, Hunchback was a way harder show and a way more impressive show. And yet it lost to Barnum. Why? Because in that little space, those 6 adjudicators somehow were drawn into that love story we were showing that was intimate and tangible and right there in front of you. And that's the powerful part about theater in a small space versus theater in a large space. If it's done really well, the audience can't help but get swept up into it. Leading in, that's why I'm doing Amelia at the Hatbox. It's another love story about 2 people, meant to be together, but tragic circumstances keeping them apart. And it's just perfect to be in a little space where the audience is on 3 sides and aren't farther than 4 rows away from you.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation, because at the Hatbox, or places like the Hatbox, the audience is very invested. They're almost a part of the show. Whereas where you go to some place like the Audi, you're being entertained. You're sitting back, almost watching something happen.
The small figures 70 feet away from you that you're maybe hearing through a speaker. Doing Farnsworth Invention at the Audi, that was my 3rd time there. It's the first play. And I don't think I would want to do another play there. It's distancing the auditorium, and it's fine for something like Hunchback or Once on This Island, the other things I've done there. But for a play, I want to be sucked in. I want to feel a part of it as an audience member.
It's so hard. And I'm not a big fan of miking people a lot. Too many problems with it. I'm one of those audience members. I'm always distracted by that thing running along their face all the time. And the sound's coming from behind you and not where it should be, I just don't like it.
Now you're sounding like an old cranky guy. Every space has its pros and cons. I think a good producer, a good director understands how to work in the benefits and you have to think about what the space provides you. That is, you can't do it in a different space. So why are you doing it in that theater? A lot of it is always is matching the show choice to the venue.
Well, part of it too there is because they always do their shows there. Can't imagine they often think outside the box. Let's go put it up at some other theater. I mean, first of all, there weren't many. I know a little bit more now. Some of them are migrating over to the Hatbox, which is an interesting phenomenon. But for the most part, they just always put their shows up there.
The Hatbox has its cons too. There's no perfect space. Every space I've worked in New Hampshire has its charms and its deficiencies. I've yet to find a space that I think is the perfect space. You have to be strategic with what you put where and how you deal with it.
How's the writing going?
Well, I just had some really good news, but it doesn't actually get me anywhere.
Breaking news. Go ahead.
So a play that I wrote called The Hairy Man, which we did a reading of at Little Church last summer.
Saw it. Well, came in late. But
yeah, it came in late, even though you're sitting in your car. You misread the time or something.
I was checking my Facebook page.
Yeah, he was updating all of his... all of his info. So anyway, I sent it to this Premier Play Festival in Keene, New Jersey. Keene University, its Premier Stages is the theater company. And it's a pretty prestigious, just across the river from New York, new play development festival that they do every year. And there were 659 entries to it, which was the most they ever had. And I made it within the top 23 semifinalists.
Congratulations.
And was very close to the top 4 finalists, which got stage readings. but didn't quite make it. So on one level, it's really great. It's the farthest I've ever gotten at a legit equity theater like that. On the other hand, I'm basically back to square one with submitting it to the next place. But the artistic director, I spoke to them on the phone a couple of times because they said they really liked the play and were really interested in it. They had some suggestions for edits before they made their final decisions. So I got some really hands-on feedback from them that was really useful. So I updated a draft, sent it back to them. Still didn't make the top 4, but I feel like I have a stronger draft out of it for wherever I'm going to send it to next. But the playwriting, biz, if you want to call it that, is really just like spend a lot of hours doing something, send it away to a lot of different places, don't hear anything, and who knows it will ever get done anywhere. But I was close, and I felt good about that.
Yeah, good. I'm glad for you. Do you spend a lot, do you labor over like every rewrite, and do you put it through some kind of vetting process where other people are making comments and editing on it?
Other than like Johanna and maybe my parents, very few people want to read your unproduced play. I mean, let's be realistic. So
unless they're in it.
Yeah, I mean, you get feedback here and there, and I did a play called The Letters last summer, also at Little Church, so we did a full production of that, and that playwright is a guy named John Lowell, and he and I sort of not became friendly. I've never met him, but we've talked on the phone a few times and emailed back and forth. And I asked him if he'd give it a read. And he gave it a read and had some really good feedback. So sort of based on his feedback, I did a rewrite, which I thought was a lot stronger than prior versions. This was the draft that I sent out to the Newburyport Firehouse Center for the Arts, which the play did win a prize. It was the winner of their Pestalozzi Prize, and they did a stage reading of it in January. And then also the one I sent to Premiere. But now that I got feedback from Premiere, it's another level. And what I learned at the stage reading in January was the play's still too long, and it gets, not that it's repetitive, but it feels like I felt to me that there was stuff that wasn't adding and propelling it forward. It was pretty words, and I liked the vibe of it, but there's nothing harder than cutting out your own work that, like you said, you spent so much time thinking about each word and what to put in. But with Premiere Stages, the feedback I got from their artistic director was, he showed me places where he suggested cutting, and it was so right on. He was so good at finding stuff to take out that wouldn't lessen the overall impact. And I didn't agree with everything he wanted to take out, but I would say I took out like 80% of it. And it cut quite a few pages off the draft. I mean, a significant amount. That would cut 5 or 10 minutes off the play, but without losing anything that was critical. So it's just a much tighter version now. But that's the type of thing you really need somebody else willing to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and be like, this is nice, but you don't need it. And when I saw where he was Xing, I was like, he's absolutely right. That's nice, but it's not necessary. And it's just adding words and adding time that doesn't add to the story. So that kind of thing was very helpful.
I couldn't take the criticism.
Well, I'm not confident enough in my writing that I have a wall up. That I don't think I know everything about writing. I've never been produced professionally or anything, so I know I have plenty to learn, and it's not perfect. While yes, it is hard to hear people say this isn't good or that isn't good, I guess I'm confident enough of my abilities as a director that as a writer, I'm humble enough to take the lumps where I need to take them and learn from it.
Do you enjoy writing?
Yes, but I'm not somebody who can just whip stuff out, because I don't have a lot of ideas that I'm excited to sit down and spend hours and hours doing. Now that this one is sort of done, until it gets done and I get more feedback, I keep saying I need to start something else, but I don't have anything jumping out at me to do. So
you don't sit at home considering yourself a playwright, just trying to force out ideas.
I don't write just for the sake of writing. I need an idea that I want to be excited about. I spent so much time on directing projects and figuring out what's next. I'm thinking about those, that if I'm going to write, it's going to be something that I really want to write. And right now, I don't have the next one on my list of what to do.
Nothing's bleeding from the ears.
No, I have some things where I have some basic ideas, but I sort of haven't figured out how to make them work yet. So, it's hard. It's hard to sit in front of a computer and just
There's
write.
A lot of discipline. Can you tell us your relationship to the theater in Laconia and the process that it's gone through so far and where it looks like it's heading?
There is no theater in Laconia. What you're referring to is the renovation of the Colonial Theater.
Yes.
And right now, that's all there is as a plan to renovate the Colonial Theater.
Have they done any work?
They did some deconstruction of the movie theater subdivisions within, so it's one big open unified space again. They have basically, Johanna and I were on a committee, the planning committee, to help them sort of figure out the design of the theater and, how it might be used. But we haven't had a meeting of that in like 2 years because it's just been sitting and waiting for funding at this point. The government shut down in December, January, delayed the CDFA tax credit awardings that were supposed to be given by February, and now it's not supposed to be till spring. And that's the big last piece of the funding puzzle. It's like $5.4 or $5.8 million of credits that they need in order to complete the funding package that will give them enough money to renovate it. But that's just renovation. We had started talking about how it might be used and what kind of group might sort of manage it, but that all those conversations got put on hold like almost 2 years ago, a year and a half, 2 years ago now, while they were fundraising. So I'm not saying anything that hasn't been in the Laconia Daily Sun or anything. It's basically sitting there waiting for funding.
Isn't there weren't they duking it out with the board? The city board or something about appropriating funds?
Well, the city council has provided some funding to the BEDC, which is the Belknap Economic Development Corp., which is the actual owner of the building and the ones who were spearheading the fundraising of it, because the city was going to be the tenant of the theater portion of it once it completed. So the city pledged a certain amount of money, and what you're referring to is that the mayor went back to the city council that should the tax credit get granted, they needed another $900,000 from the city in order to equip the theater once the theater itself is built. So it's a multifaceted thing with many different entities having their funding and responsibilities and enmeshed. So, yeah, I think they will know more by spring of whether it's moving forward or not. And I honestly don't know what Plan B is if they don't get this funding. I don't know that there is one, or if there is a Plan B, it's definitely been talked about at higher levels than I'm privy to.
That's a shame.
Well, it's interesting because there's a lot of hope that it will spur economic development in downtown. That was the point of it. But it's going to be a space like the Audi, a big space. Real question is how many groups will be able to fill it, take advantage of that space, and how often it will be used. So whether there's some permanent group there and then it gets rented out to other groups when it's available or what, that's a lot remains to be seen. But it's a tricky space for that arts market. I mean, you and I know the Lakes region is not the hottest arts market. Yeah, I mean, certainly it's much less than Concord and way less than Portsmouth and Manchester. So
downtown Laconia is not exactly busting out with vibrancy.
No, but it certainly could. The question is, are there enough people in the Lakes region who care enough about the arts that they'll come out to support a new venue? And, like I learned starting in a storefront theater in the Weirs, just because you build it doesn't mean they will come. Mm-hmm. So there's certainly a big question mark as to how much the Lakes region is going to be able to support this thing.
Well, at some levels, they're duking it out for audience, right? You've got the Winnie, you've got Meadowbrook. In the South, you've got the CCA. I don't know, does it cannibalize from those?
I think, in my opinion, it's going to end up more like the Audi. It's not fighting for professional space, regularly. I didn't listen to the Katie Collins podcast yet. Sorry, Katie. I'm sure she talked about the amount of fundraising needed to keep the CCA going and thriving every year. And I think everyone in Laconia knows that level of fundraising on an annual basis is not practical or logical. So for people to aspire to that sort of model, needing that kind of funds to stay afloat every year is not likely to happen.
Well, that would mean you'd have to rely on ticket sales, right?
Right, but the CCA doesn't rely on ticket sales.
No, I know, but they have a better demographic.
For ticket sales.
Yeah.
And for fundraising.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So
exactly.
To not be able to fundraise means you have to rely on those ticket sales. And if you're not a vibrant community for the arts, good luck. I mean, you would almost have to get professional, big name things to come in, because you can't sell tickets $15 a head.
But you can't afford to pay for a big professional thing to come in, because if you don't sell tickets, you've just lost your budget for the year.
Catch-22.
Yeah. Whatever it is, I think is going to have to start local and grow over time as interest demands. I think there is a market for local programming, and we know that, having done community theater for 14, 15 years in the Lakes region, people will support that. People will support their friends and neighbors, will support their kids, and it's a way, way cheaper to put on those kinds of shows than to bring in the national tour of Cats.
They'll have to do a lot of Annie shows. Get the kids in there.
Yeah, I mean, there's options. I think it's just about being smart with how much you are spending and making sure you're keeping your costs under control in a way that local grassroots support and enthusiasm can support it. There's no magic wand. It's going to be hard work for
Uphill all the way.
whoever ends up. If the thing gets built and however it ends up being managed is going to take some time to figure out what works and how they can stay open and keep the lights on without constant city support, which it doesn't sound like there will be.
So we're getting close to needing to wrap up. Tell me about what's going on, Amelia.
Yeah, so Amelia is... Anyone who listens to this, I would really encourage you to come see Amelia. It's only 4 performances. It's only going to be set out about... Yeah, it's only one weekend.
Oh.
It's only going to be about 80 seats, and it is just a beautiful play. I tell people, I read about it in 2011. The man who wrote it was performing it in Washington, D.C. with his wife as the 2 actors in it. The woman plays Amelia, and the man plays everybody else. Her love interest, Ethan, and then all the other characters she interacts with. Male, female, black, white, Union, Confederate. It starts in 1861. I emailed the guy. I found the website for it. It wasn't published at the time. It was a brand new thing. I emailed the guy and said, I'd really love to read this play. It sounds really interesting.
Are there any lizards in it?
No lizards. And I remember getting the return email from him like in the afternoon. And I had something to do later that day. But I said, let me just read the beginning and see if this is even worth thinking
He was going to
about.
blow you off, or...
No, just to see if, I wasn't planning to sit and read the whole thing. I was planning just to open it, read the first few pages, see if it was worth coming back to, because I had somewhere to go. And I ended up reading it in one sitting. Like, I was hooked by the first paragraph that I just had to know what happened to this woman. She opens the show with a monologue, and I just loved the writing. And I saw the play in, I think it was 2012. They moved it to New York and did it in the Armory of Governor's Island. So you had to take a ferry to get to it. And then it was like in an underground armory, a Civil War armory.
What?
Yeah, it was really cool. And watched them do it, and I just wanted to do it ever since. And it was just about finding sort of the right time, place, and, this is pre-Hatbox, and we almost did it at the Playhouse, but didn't work out, and I've just always had it on my to-do list. And when I started working with Cherie Owens in Once on This Island a couple years ago, and then she was also in Barnum, we just sort of clicked as director-actress, and I thought she'd be really good in this role, even though she mostly does musicals. So I sort of came to her and I said, here's the script. I think you'd be really good in this role. What do you think? And she wanted to do it. And then it was a question of the hard role is the guy, because he has to do all these different parts with no costume changes, just by changing, posture, dialect, whatever. And I think she came up with Wayne Asbury, who's done a lot of stuff with Theater Kapow. And so the two of them came to Johanna and my house and did a reading of it. And we're like, yeah, this chemistry works. They'll be perfect. So from there, it was like, all right, let's try and get it on the Hatbox schedule. It's coming on, like I said, it's 8 years in the making since I first read it. It's just a beautiful play. We've had a read through, but the first rehearsals tonight, and I can't wait to get them up on their feet and figuring out how to make the transitions and things.
Is that going to be the biggest challenge, the transitions in it? Because if there's only 2 people, how difficult could the rest of the show be?
It's finding sort of the style of how to. These 2 are great actors, and watching them read the script, I've once in my living room and then when our first read through, you would enjoy just watching them read it. So what I can add is how to make it even more engaging through the physical actions and stuff. And so we just have a really good production team, and excited to be working with those actors. So it's going to be one weekend only, and I'm hoping to fill the place.
What's the dates?
April 18th, 19th, 20th. So Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights, and Saturday afternoon. We're not doing Sunday because it's Easter Sunday. So we finish Saturday night. And then I go on to 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, which is...
You held auditions recently?
Yeah, we have a great cast for that, too. I'm really excited. So many people came out. It was really, really hard to have to let a lot of people go that I enjoyed working with in the past and who are super talented. But
no lizards in that one.
No lizards, and only 9 roles. So we had about 40 people try out for the 9 roles. So
really?
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Where is that going to take place?
That's an actual Hatbox production. For those of you who don't know, everyone's listened to Andrew Pinard's podcast already. But if you missed it, Hatbox mostly is a receiving house for different groups to pitch and do their shows. So Amelia is actually something that Johanna and I are producing ourselves. But Spelling Bee will actually be a Hatbox production like Barnum was 2 summers ago. So that's in July. And then right after that ends, I go up to Gene's Playhouse to work on The Fantastics, which I've done before, but is one that I really love. It's just such a beautiful, sweet musical, and I love it. And that's going to be interesting. You know, you asked, are there shows you look back on you want to, do better or differently? And I really loved my production of Fantastics when I did it in 2013. I don't remember it like at all. I'm getting older, and the general concept will be the same, but I don't really remember much of the staging, so that will all be new. But that's Joel's like, I don't want to just copy your last time. And I was like, well, I couldn't if I wanted to, but the concept will be generally the same, but I'll build upon the concept. So not that there's something I think I did, we did poorly that I want to do better, but I told Joel, if you're listening, Joel, just don't worry. But I told Joel that it will be bigger and better, and we will build upon the concept from last time.
You're killing me. Basically touting the benefits of Alzheimer's. It's new every time.
Yes, exactly. It's like a goldfish. I know I did the show before, but I can't remember what I did, so we'll figure something out.
I love Gene's. I like Gene's Playhouse a lot.
And you'll be there this summer. Just not working with me.
Ouch. What is that sharp object in my back? Oh,
no, I'm sure Joel will find me someone better.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I'll just say, I don't know, for those of you who don't know Ray, as talented as he is, he's also pretty lovable. So this is why he takes a joke really well.
Am I turning red?
No, you only do that in shows. If you haven't seen Ray turn red in a theater performance, you are missing out.
It's worth the money.
It's like a Bugs Bunny cartoon. He's yet to figure out how to generate steam coming out of his ears, but he's pretty darn close.
Oh, man, I'm going to have a heart attack.
Oh, please don't. Please don't.
All right, my friend, thanks for coming by.
It's always a pleasure to talk about myself with such a supportive audience like you.
Thanks for listening, and be sure to check back for my future podcasts, where just some of my guests will be Jim Regato, Michael Curtis, and Matt Cahoon.